Hey, what's up, lightboltjoe here. Today we are going to discuss the fourth book in the Trials of Apollo series by Rick Riordan. This is called The Tyrant's Tomb. Book 4, The Tyrant's Tomb. This is, let's see, what book number is this in the Percy Jackson universe? So we got 5 Percy Jackson books, we got 5 Heroes of Olympus books, so it's 10. We got 3 Kane Chronicles, we got 3 Magnus Chases, so that's 16. So 20th book. But then there's like 5 or 6 like companion books. Let's say 26th, just to be safe. 26th, right? This is a long series, but so perfect. We talked about book 3 way back when I first read it. I want to say 2 years ago. This is an incredible series. I know. For instance, in the last review that we did, we talked about Never Have I Ever. It was a new TV show on Netflix, right? And the amazing character development that happened within only 10 episodes of 30-minute long episodes, right? Incredible character development on numerous character fronts. I have praised Rick Riordan numerous times on his character development, especially Apollo. Apollo's character development is incredible. He's so humanized as Lester Papadopoulos. He's not this arrogant prick that he normally was as a god, as an immortal, as an eternal, as an Olympian. So it's very interesting to see such character development. Now, Rick writes very hardcore stuff. That's the best way to say it. You get emotionally attached to characters. The first Percy Jackson and the Olympians book, The Lightning Thief, came out in 2005. We've grown with these characters for 15 years. It's been a long time. A long time. But rightfully so, right? So at the end of the last book, we discussed how upset I was at the death of Jason Grace, son of Jupiter, son of Zeus. His sister Talia Grace is, a hunter of Artemis. She was a pine tree back at Camp Half-Blood on Long Island, guarding the camp for quite some time. But it's not really mentioned the fact that certain demigods are still related to certain gods. So in this case, Apollo took such a hard hit at Jason's death at the end of the last book, and still throughout this book, that he just didn't remember so much that Jason is technically his brother. They share the same father. Therefore, Talia is his sister. They share the same father. Just like Artemis, Greek form, Diana, Roman form, is his sister. They share the same father. So the end of the last book, Jason had said to Apollo before he passed that he wants Apollo to remember what it is to be human, right? And that was the central theme of this book. This was an incredible book. It was very light compared to how hardcore other Rick Riordan's books are. And when I say light, I mean less. Yeah, there's death constantly throughout every book of his, but it wasn't as dramatic as other books. I said, oh shit, quite a few times during this book, but I didn't cry during this book. I wasn't shedding many tears. I wasn't angry at certain parts. I was, okay, this is toned down. This is much calmer than other books. Okay, we can get through this. And I think that was very specific that Uncle Rick wrote it this way, because other books are so intense and so drama-filled and so slap in your face of who betrayed who and who's relative and who needs to do what for this quest and what prophecy is this and, who's losing a family member, etc. But this was a toned-down book. This started out very dramatically in the sense of Meg McCaffrey and our dear old Lester Papadopoulos, 12-year-old Meg and 16-year-old, give or take, Lester. They are coming back from where where the two of them and Piper and Jason were fighting against one of the emperors. Where's my list? Caligula, Commodus. Nero is not in this book. They fought Nero the last book. King Tarquin was a big thing of this. He's the Tyrant, the Tyrant's Tomb. That's what this book is about. To an extent. I don't agree with the title of this book, and we'll get into that. I'm going to put that down for a minute. I got to talk. Okay. So, Meg and Apollo, Lester, are bringing Jason's body back to Camp Jupiter in Oakland, in the Oakland Hills of California, right? And all hell breaks loose. There's a monster that attacks them. I forget the monster's name. But they wind up getting help from this legionnaire of the 12th cohort at Camp Jupiter, whose name is Lavinia. I can't say her name. Pink hair, pink eyebrows, bubblegum chewing, gangly like a giraffe, as Apollo has described, but dancer qualities. And she's with a fawn, Dawn. So they help kind of get them away from the monster through a cave. Hazel Lavesque comes into the picture as well. Our dear Hazel that she is, daughter of Pluto, sister to Nico D'Angelo, who's the son of Hades, who's dating Apollo's son Will Solus at Camp Half-Blood. This is the thing. It's a soap opera. You gotta know who's related to who where and who's dating who when and all these things, right? So eventually Jason's body gets to the camp after, Apollo gets scratched by this monster who's got this poison stuff in him. And he's not a god, he's mortal. So he's very susceptible to damage and stuff, right? So they go with the funeral. It's very emotional. Well, emotional to have Jason on the pyre and, the feast of that nature as well. Creator Frank Zhang is here as well. He's still holding his stick of life that if it burns up, then he dies, kind of thing, the curse of Hera. Creator Reyna is here as well, the awesome badass chick that she is. And we have a lot of strong characters throughout the years. We have a lot of character development throughout the years. We have a lot of strong characters and character development in this book as well. So after all of this funeral stuff goes on, I'm just going to give the basic layout of the book as I keep iterating, my thoughts. That's what we're supposed to do. Tyson the Cyclops, who's Percy Jackson's half-brother, and Ella the Harpy, who Percy and company brought back to Camp Jupiter after one of their quests, are trying to recreate the Sibylline books. And there's only 3 left in existence. 6 were burned many years ago. And so they're trying to get the books back together. But the only way to get the books back together is to have them imprinted on flesh. So Ella the Harpy is literally tattooing in purple ink on Tyson's skin the 3 Sibylline books. I was like, wow, this is pretty intense, but it was pretty cool. So there's prophecies galore in that. They have to go see the Tyrant's tomb, which is under a carousel kind of north of the hills, to just get information like why is he trying to attack the camp, things of that nature, right? He really wants Apollo, he wants other legionnaires to join his zombie cause because he's a skeletal king, King Tarkin, and he has not died since the Roman times. So you have Cumulus and Caligula. I can't say the names, but whatever. 2 Roman emperors out of the big 3, Nero, Commodus, and Caligula. Now, obviously, Apollo's had relations, with all of them throughout the times. Who did he date at one point? Commodus? Did he kill Commodus at one point? Yeah, that makes sense why it was so poetic doing it again. So, all hell breaks loose in the tomb. It was Hazel, Meg, Apollo, Lavinia, trying to get information and then wind up finding some zombies. Apollo's still getting this zombie poison creeping through him, through these purple veins, which kind of gave me the mindset of what the zombies in Scout's Guide to the Zombie Apocalypse looked like, how that infection's like blue and like it just like creeps up. I thought that was pretty cool. So that's what the mindset that I got while reading this. They go back to the camp, they deliver the messages, they get a new prophecy that a sacrifice would have to be made to a god for godly help in order to, help defeat emperors to save the camp, basically. That's the objective of this book, to save the camp. And so the only way to do that is to get the last breath of a silent god and shatter glass or something along that lines. So lo and behold, it turns out that there's a tower, Sutro Tower in California, that Meg, Reyna, and Apollo and Reyna's 2 metal greyhounds, Argentum and Arum, go to see what the hell's going on. So they climb the tower, they fight some ravens, all these backstories on why the ravens exist, etc., etc. They find Harpocrates, who is a Ptolemaic god. Ptolemaic gods are a mixture of Greek and Egyptian gods. When Alexander the Great invaded Egypt way back in the day, he brought the Greek gods to the Egyptian front. And when Alex's empire was split into 5 different empires when he died, here's a little history for you. Ptolemy was the first Greek-Egyptian king. Does that make sense? King Ptolemy? Crazy person that he was, but he brought in a hybrid of gods. So Harpocrates is always pictured like this, which is a Egyptian symbol for child, right? But everyone sees it as silence, because when you go like this to someone, it means be quiet, close your mouth, shut your lips. So the silent god is Harpocrates. He's always pictured as a 10-year-old child. He wears the bowling pin crown, etc. He himself is holding a glass jar of the last voice of a Sibyl who Apollo had relations with back in the day, and she didn't want to be immortal, and he made her immortal, and he was a dick back then, and he's changed. He's learning his humanity, he's learning his empathy, etc. So fights went on, arrangements went on. The last breath of the silent god was put into the jar to then use to call upon godly help to help the camp when the 2 emperors and their fleet of yachts in San Francisco Bay were coming to attack the camp with Greek fire, right? So while this is going on, Tarquin is still doing underground stuff with his zombies in the sewers and the aqueduct system, because Tarquin did make the aqueducts for Rome back in the day. So he's familiar with that, because this is new Rome, not ancient Rome. So as this is happening, there's fights in the bay, there's fights in the woods, there's fights in tunnels, there's fights in New Rome, there's fights with Terminus, right at the border. Death is going on, and Frank and Apollo wind up in a tunnel with Caligula and Commodus, right? Frank then therefore incinerates himself with the stick of which is his life force to have the Greek fire explosion that they set up down there kill the emperors. But somehow Commodus still lived. Apollo chokes the life out of him, which was a nice little scene to see. Assuming Frank is dead, and then you're thinking, oh great, another one of the prophetic 7 is dead, and I got to deal with this again. So, trying to get those emotions together, the story progresses. Everyone else is doing their own things. The war is eventually won. Talia Grace and the hunters of Artemis, hunters of Diana, come in after to help kill Tarquin in the bookstore that Ella and Tyson owned, where the Sibyl books were being imprinted on his body through tattoo. And so Diana and Apollo had a very nice heart-to-heart saying how much he has changed, and she was very impressed because she never thought she would ever see that day, kind of a thing. The god speaking to the former god, the goddess speaking to the former god. It was a very powerful moment between the two of them, I give it that. But Talia and Apollo needed to speak because of the death of Jason. Talia is Jason's sister. But again, all 4 of them are technically brother and sister. So after the war, it is revealed that Frank actually survived because he broke Hera's curse, that he himself took control of his own destiny by incinerating the fire. So he had a predator cape around his nether regions, as they kept calling it, continuously as a diaper, to protect himself there. But he came out of the fire unscathed. He just burned off all his hair and eyebrows and stuff. That was it. And he survived because he took control of his destiny. Much like how he washed away Hazel's curse. Hazel washed away his curse, but he took control of his own destiny, and then therefore that happened with that. With the last Senate meeting, we'll give it that, of everyone in New Rome who was left to survive after the funeral pyres and everything of that nature is going on, Rhaena states that she is joining the hunt of Diana. Talia gives her vows. She therefore is now a huntress of Artemis, a huntress of Diana, because of the conversations that her and Apollo had had. Apollo had hilariously offered to be her boyfriend to heal her broken heart, which is a curse from Venus, I'm sorry. When they were up on Sutro Tower. So it was a hysterical moment between the two of them. But it's really more powerful to have one badass bisexual person and another badass bisexual person, Rhaena and Apollo accordingly, talk to each other and say, listen, we could date, but we don't need to. And you're badass and I'm badass and we're great. And all these things. It's such a great empowerment kind of a thing. I just love that sense of equality between demigod and god and former god. So I thought that was pretty neat. Apollo also through this is still poisoned, right? But Artemis eventually does heal him. Diana eventually does heal him. despite Jupiter's wishes, but she had to abide by the call of, the Sibyl's jar and the soundless god's voice. It's a whole prophecy thing that went through that. So now it's a matter of Hazel becomes Praetor after Reyna steps down to join the hunt. Frank is still a Praetor of New Rome. So the two of them are going to run New Rome, while Apollo and Meg now travel back to New York after all of this time. This is where all of this started, only a few months ago, to literally go to the Tower of Nero. That's the name of the 5th book. Nero being Meg's stepfather. There's bad blood between that. Apollo obviously has to fight Python at some point, who's somewhere within the Delphi, but it's a matter of getting more of the prophecy. It's another quest. So my question is, what happens next? After the 5th book, what happens next? Are we going to get another spin-off series? Because this is a series that can just continuously keep going on and on. They literally threw in, this is supposed to be about Roman stuff, right? They threw in a Ptolemaic god in this as a main center point of a prophecy. That's Greek. That's a Greco-Egyptian god, Harpocrates. I'm so impressed just combining all these things together. And Uncle Rick knows how to write. I've never had a bad thing to say about Uncle Rick. But my question for this, why was it called Tyrant's Tomb? They were in the Tyrant's Tomb for, I don't know, a chapter? 2 chapters? There's 43 chapters plus a glossary. I don't think it should have been called the Tyrant's Tomb. I think it should have been called something else. I don't know what it should have been called, but I don't think it should have been called the Tyrant's Tomb, especially because it's called the Tyrant's Tomb. And what is this picture? Oh, this is a picture of Sutro Tower where you have Meg, Apollo, and Reyna fighting one of the ravens to get to Harpocrates and the Sibyl's voice up in the tower. Like, this scene has nothing to do with the Tyrant's Tomb. Like, I just find it weird. I don't know what I would have called it. I'd have to think on it, but I would not have called this book The Tyrant's Tomb. If I'm nitpicking, that's my only problem with this book, is that I don't think the name of the book is appropriate, because Tarkin wasn't really that important, aside from the fact that Apollo was about to become one of his zombie minions. That's really it. I also like that we have 4 different words for zombie. You had the Chinese version, you had the Greek version, you had the Roman version, I think you had the Latin version, but then you had the English version, so 5. So I thought that was pretty neat as well. Yeah, I used my There Will Be Blood Heroes of Olympus bookmark. It's a nice little hologram right there. And I think that's it. See, I'm not as emotional as I was reviewing the 3rd book, because this was a much calmer book than the other ones. It was very straightforward. You had 4 or 5 major scenes. The dialogue between the characters is great, but going back to what I originally said, character development. Uncle Rick is a genius with character development. And to have Apollo find his humanity and understand the concept of humanity and appreciate it and be hard on himself for being such a dick all these centuries is impressive. It's very impressive. Millennia is impressive. So, on to, I don't know what book we're going to read next, but Tower of Nero comes out fall, I believe, 2020, so we'll see how that goes. I'm excited to see what happens after that. I know that there's another spin-off, like Welcome to Camp Jupiter book coming out soon. I forget the name of it. It's a nice little companion book, like we were talking about before, that the other books tend to have. And I think that's it. Did I forget something? I think we covered it. This was a nice simple review. We can breathe now. Apollo lives. Meg lives. She's got a bag of coffee. They're on their quest to go to New York. We'll see what shenanigans happen next. And to that we say, Mucho mahalo.